What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020, and we're going to be getting into our programming here today. The usual thing, we're going to talk about news during the first hour, and then as we get closer to the second hour, we'll open up the phone lines for your calls and comments and so forth and so on. Okay, there we are. So now getting on into the news here. You know, when I was growing up, there was a phrase that everybody used to use, which is don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And it has to do with the fact that, you know, back then you didn't wash the baby, you know, in the bathtub or in the kitchen sink or anything like that. You would have a tub and you'd wash the baby. And then after the baby was washed, you'd take the tub and throw the water out over the back porch and everything. Sounds very, very primitive and very quaint and everything. But yeah, that's how these things were done. And the whole purpose of the statement was the idea that, you know, you want to throw out the bad stuff, but you don't want to throw out the good stuff with it. And what I'm seeing in all these riots and protests all across the country, especially with regard to the statues and all those controversies there, is people who are so eager to excise bad things from history, they're willing to throw out all of history at the same time. And that, of course, is a huge, huge mistake, because history is our greatest teacher and guide as we move into the future world. And especially now with the younger people, it's, you know, let's be honest, it's your turn. You're coming up and you're about to take control of the nation and its future. And you should have the lessons of history to act as your guide. Because, yes, mistakes have been made in the past, such as slavery, but we're going to make those mistakes all over again if we forget how they came about. So I'm very much opposed to this tearing down of monuments and this tearing down of statues, especially because some of them are getting darn silly. You know, we're going after this, we're going after that. Why? I don't know, but everybody says we've got to tear this down here. Anyway, up in Seattle, the mayor has folded on the so-called Summer of Love and has sent the police in to dismantle the CHOP protest zone after the shootings over the weekend here. So the Summer of Love is over, to be followed by the Autumn of Gonorrhea. And somebody wrote me an email earlier today saying, you know, the reality is you've got this very discontented segment of the population out there screaming that all white people are collectively responsible for slavery, which is historically not true. Another reason to keep those monuments and everything up there. And saying that, you know, if the black population wants to take that attitude, then all blacks everywhere are equally responsible for the rioting and the vandalism and the destruction that we're seeing take place in front of our very eyes. And that before you start, you know, criticizing the white population, it's time to clean up your own house. Let they who are without sin, so forth and so on. And people in glass houses shouldn't throw rocks, as it were. Anyway, even as the Seattle CHOP zone is being taken down, rioters near the White House try to tear down the president of the statue of former President Andrew Jackson in Lafayette Park and try and set up a Black House autonomous zone. And they vandalized the church again. And again, like I said yesterday, this is not helping their cause. It is making them look bad. It is fueling the anger and resentment. Because as I mentioned yesterday, we're all growing up in this country, and we understand this country is not perfect. Its government is certainly not perfect. You know, by and large, the people are pretty wonderful, is what I've learned through my long life here. But we have politicians who make really, really bad decisions. And in our view, at least, we're supposed to have some control over that. But we've grown up with these icons, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, and so forth. And when they get attacked, we take it personally because they form part of our identity. They form part of our self-image. You know, I live in a country that has these statues, these flags, these monuments, these historical events took place right here, and I feel like I'm a part of it because I have stood in the same place and I've looked at the monument. Well, you take that away from people, their minds are going to interpret it as a personal attack, and they're going to respond like that. And so this current path that everybody is on with vandalizing the statues and tearing them down and tearing down the monuments and everything, it's going to end badly. It's going to end with more violence. There's no way to back off from this other than to back off from it and say, okay, return to status quo ante. Let's leave the rest of the monuments and the statues back up. Maybe we'll put back a few of them that have been taken down and put in storage. But we can't go on obsessing about things that happened 200 years ago to the point of ignoring what's happening right in front of our eyes today, things that we could actually change. And that's really what's going on. We're being double shuffled here. We're being swindled. We're being encouraged to get all upset about things that happened long before we were even alive, things that we can do absolutely nothing about other than vandalism and destruction. And meanwhile, things are happening, things are being done by bad people in government right in front of our eyes, and we're not seeing it. It's like a really cheap magic act where the misdirection is out there. We need to knock it off here. Anyway, over at the White House again, apparently there was an altercation that erupted between police and rioters who were trying to pull down Andrew Jackson's statue and create this Black House autonomous zone. Apparently things got so out of hand, the press was evacuated from the White House. They just said, put them on a bus, get them out of here. Because there was this criminal mob of rioters clashing with police outside, right in front of the White House. And again, the White House itself, that's an iconic image. It's part of our identity as a nation, as a people. Senator Tom Cotton got out on the floor of Congress today and said, we need to remember that destroying these statues is a crime. And it carries a 10-year sentence. And apparently Donald Trump has gone on out and requested that federal authorities lock up everybody trying to destroy a statue anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's Union, Confederate, cereal box. They're trying to pull a halt to this whole thing right now. As well as they should. What we need is calm discussion. But somebody's out there trying to fan all this. I understand the going rate for a protester / vandal / criminal is like $50 an hour now. That's actually good money in this economy. And I have to wonder who's paying for all this. Who is paying to hire people to pretend to be protesters at $50 an hour, smashing windows and tearing down statues? Anyway, historic St. John's Church in D.C. has been vandalized again. Weeks after it was set on fire, apparently they spray painted across the front of it the BHOZ for the Black House Occupation Zone. So finally, the DC police have had enough, and they're going on in and they're going after the mob. They're saying the mob is not going to run the city. Look at what a terrible job they did out in Seattle. And that's really where this whole so-called movement failed utterly. They weren't prepared to succeed. They had no plans whatsoever for waste collection, for first aid, for keeping law and order. We understand that there has been a crime spree in all of these occupation zones because the police won't go in there anymore. So there's been a lot of robberies and rapes and burglaries and muggings, and it's just completely out of control. It's the sort of environment you would see in life under a warlord, which is what they're describing the leaders of this movement is. And I don't know about you. I have a real problem with the idea of the United States broken up into these zones run by warlords. I mean, to me, that is a major, major step along the way to collapse of the United States. And I know I have been forecasting that's exactly what's going to happen in the long run. And it appears to be right on the cusp. Doesn't mean I have to like it, and to be very honest, I don't. I was kind of looking for a way out, and on that particular regard, I have been a complete and utter failure for these last 25 years. Okay, the New York City officials have sent in police to protect the iconic Columbus statue in Columbus Circle, so they're keeping an eye on that one. And let's see, this one is a little alarming. Meghan McCain is out there saying we're 1 week away from discussing blowing up Mount Rushmore, as she compares removing problematic statues to eliminating people from American history. Boy, talk about the old Soviet Union. When they came to power following the October Revolution, they did exactly the same thing. The statues all got torn down. The monuments got torn down. They put up a whole new manufactured history. for everybody to learn for the next generation. And we're seeing it again with the fall of the Soviet Union. They tore down all the statues of Lenin. Now, Lenin was not a good guy, but on the other hand, he made his mark on history. And if we're to avoid a new Lenin, the best way is to remind everybody of what the old Lenin was like. When they talk about Mount Rushmore, again, that's an icon around which Americans tend to form their identity. And blowing up Mount Rushmore is not going to do a thing for racial equality. If anything, it's going to make people much more angry. It's going to increase the racial divide. All right, Black Lives Matter leader Shaun King is telling his followers to target statues of Jesus. And he says statues of Jesus Christ are a form of white supremacy and suggests they should all be torn down. Well, there's a couple of problems with that. First of all, Jesus is portrayed as a white European because of the Church of Rome being in Rome. And when they wanted to unify the image of Jesus among all their churches, they got an artist to make up a whole bunch of artwork, all based on one of the sons of the Borgia popes. So the Jesus conventional image that we see in the churches isn't the guy. He wasn't the only white guy in Palestine. He was Palestinian, and he looked Palestinian. And his name was Joshua, and he had a huge, huge, huge impact on the ancient world. Now, I'm not a big churchy type person here, but I get very, very upset at the idea that they're going to start targeting statues of Jesus. Who's next? Buddha? I mean, you think about that for a little while. I mean, and again, talking about icons that form part of the identity of people. I mean, if you talk to Christians around this country, I mean, you know, Jesus is it. It's the core of their life and their religion. And they feel very strongly about it. And if you've ever tried to debate anybody over religion, you can see how they take it personally. They're not ready to step back and be academic and objective. They're taking it personally. They're reacting as if they're being personally attacked. And that's going to happen with this as well. This is a very, very, very dangerous thing for these people to be doing, and I don't think it should be done. Leave the statue where it is. It's not really hurting anybody. We just have a bunch of whiners out there saying the presence of this statue offends me. Okay, well, be offended. I don't care. Anyway, up in Chicago, the model for gun control for the liberals, this last weekend, 104 people were shot, 14 killed in Chicago, and other defund the police target cities see major gun crime incidents on the increase. And I was watching an article on Fox television about Chicago and say, you know, how do we stop this violence here? And of course, it was a lead to say, well, we got to ban all the guns. They've already banned the guns. Big deal it made. Big, huge help. The core issue is these people are being fanned up. They're being fed this fairy tale that they're discriminated against, that the failures in their own life, the bad choices they've made aren't really their fault. I mean, if you take a minute and you go on out there and you look at, for one example, all of the black people who have become successes. Musicians, athletes, executives, business owners. There's a lot of them out there. And by the way, they really resent all of this wailing about discrimination and racism because it cheapens their own personal accomplishment. People are out there saying, oh, they're just in there because of, you know, affirmative action and all these special programs. And no, these people got there because they worked hard, they made good choices, and they did something with their lives. And they are, and they should be very, very proud. And all of these other people who are out there whose lives aren't working, and for the exact same reasons that a lot of white lives aren't working, they cheapen that whole image. They really, really do. All right, let's get back to our local political scene. There is still a big kerfuffle going over the fake ticket applications for the Tulsa rally. It's now estimated that as many as 300,000 fake ticket applications were found. Applications for the tickets for which nobody ever intended to show up. And Trump is, needless to say, very upset. And of course, the media is going to town saying, oh, he only had 6,000 people show up there. The campaign's magnetometers counted 12,000, which was 11,990 more people than attended Joe Biden's last event. But you don't hear that from the media. But what they're doing now here is they're saying that just show up. TikTok users are still claiming credit for sabotaging the Tulsa rally with fake registrations, and they've announced they're going to continue to do the same. Well, obviously, the Trump campaign has to do something about that, so they're abandoning the online signups for his next rally, and it's saying to people, just turn up. Because if these media people are telling the truth and we're not filling the venue, you'll get a seat. And if you show up and you can't get a seat, then you'll know the media was lying. I don't know, if he has a rally somewhere around here, I might just make a point of going, just to show up and say, yes, I'm here to sit in the seat and support Donald Trump. Not because I particularly am happy with him as president of the United States, but as an American, I have that American characteristic of fair play. And I don't like the way this campaign is already being steered here. Now, Trump is out there warning that foreign nations are going to use mail-in ballots to rig our 2020 election. I think he's presuming it's going to be in Biden's favor, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. They have to steal it for Biden. He's falling apart on stage. Even today, they were talking again about how he's out there making a speech at his last event, and the wrap-up, the close, it didn't make any coherent sense whatsoever. Now, Biden has committed to 3 debates with Donald Trump. Boy, am I going to want to watch those things. Get the beer and pretzels out for that one. And they're still going on and on about the statue of Teddy Roosevelt over at the New York Museum of Natural History, which is where they filmed the movie Night at the Museum, which is a fun movie, let's be honest about it. And Robin Williams did this fabulous job of bringing the Theodore Roosevelt statue to life. And now, of course, they have moved that statue because he's offensive to people. Well, he's not offensive to me. There's actually a family connection. My maternal grandfather rode with the Rough Riders. So I'm 1 degree of separation away from Theodore Roosevelt, which doesn't mean I agree with everything that he did, especially the Yankee division. But it is now being suggested around Hollywood that the Theodore Roosevelt statue at the New York Museum of Natural History be replaced with one of Robin Williams as Theodore Roosevelt. Now, that's not going to placate any of the people who want Roosevelt gone. And I certainly don't have a problem with a statue of Robin Williams. He was a very brilliant and creative man. I don't think the museum is a good place for it. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of places around Hollywood who will want a statue of Robin Williams. You know, everybody admired him, and he was just brilliant at improvisation. Anyway, John Bolton is still out there pushing his book. Apparently he's not getting a lot of sales, partly because it's already been pirated all over the net here. But he's saying he's considered testifying before Congress. Unfortunately, Congress's response so far is, maybe somewhere, down the roads we'll have you over to talk about it. But Bolton was expecting House Democrats to be out there screaming and clapping and saying, yes, let's get him in here. It's not happening. And I think that maybe the Democrats are thinking Bolton is damaging their brand, which is really not doing all that well at the moment here. All right, everybody's talking about NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace finding a noose inside his assigned garage at NASCAR, but it's already shaping up that it may have been just either a hoax or a misunderstanding. And we'll explain why after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Here we're talking about Bubba Wallace, the only black NASCAR driver currently in the lineup. And they're getting ready for the races up at Talladega, I think it is. And he was going into the garage space that he was assigned for his racing team and saw what appeared to be a noose hanging from the door. And it immediately went viral. Everybody's out there screaming. They had a parade for him. The FBI is investigating, and it's turning out this may have been either a hoax or a misunderstanding, Probably the latter, because the cord that holds that loop in there is the cord that pulls down the garage door when you're done from the day. And looking at the other garage units, they also have loops in that same cord. So somebody looked at the loop in the cord and said, noose, 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 racism, 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 and it took off and the corporate media did the rest of it. But it's looking to, certainly from here, if it wasn't a deliberate hoax, it was definitely a misinterpretation of what was actually there. Now, you remember a while back there was a story where these 3 New York Police Department officers were claimed to have been poisoned by a Shack Shake milkshake. And apparently they never actually got sick. The department overreacted with the tweet that the cops were under attack. They were sent to the hospital, but they never developed any symptoms whatsoever. And ultimately it was claimed that an improperly cleaned shake machine was to blame for the whole incident. So everybody's on these hair triggers. Wow, it's got to be racism. It's got to be this. It's got to be, it's like COVID-19. No matter what you die of, it's going to be COVID-19. What happened to this guy? Fell off a building. Oh, COVID-19 death. What about this guy over here? Truck ran over him. Oh, COVID-19. Gosh, that thing is just getting around, isn't it here? 140 people died in this plane crash. All COVID-19. All COVID-19. It struck them down just before the plane hit the ground. So they're doing the same thing now with everything that's happening in our society. Somehow or other, it's got to be warped to deal with the issue of racism. Because the Democrats and the media are going to try and use racism as a weapon against Trump in November. And you know something? I think it's going to backflash. I think it's going to backfire because just like people are getting tired of COVID-19 all the time, all day, all night, weeks on end, I think by the time November gets here, we're going to be sick about hearing about racism. We're going to be out there in the streets and just screaming, we're not racist, we're just tired. Go burn down your own neighborhoods, which is actually a lot of what they're doing right now, I might add here. Anyway, apparently CNN has built a protective wall around its headquarters in Atlanta to keep the protesters out. And, yeah. I want to talk about J.K. Rowling. She came out, and this is the lady who wrote the Harry Potter series, which is very popular. I love the movies. They're really well done. She has donated the vast majority of her earnings from the book and film franchises to charity. So I have a lot of admiration for this lady. And she came out earlier this month with a very simple comment saying, gender is biologically determined and there are only 2, which happens to be the actual fact scientifically. And even if you say, let's ignore the science here, it's her opinion. And she has a right to her opinion. Well, needless to say, the transgender community is up in arms saying, oh, you can't say that. You can't say that. There's 5 million different genders. And, we pick ours, with a giant wheel of fortune over in Las Vegas, and I'm 2/3 this and 1/3 that and 1/18/16 Cherokee Indian. And they're making a really huge deal about it. So apparently, 4 authors who nobody has ever heard of before have resigned from J.K. Rowling's literary agency after accusing it of failing to issue a public statement in support of transgender rights and equality. Well, that's real brown shirt thinking. And I know brown is not a color the transgenders like, but too bad. And but again, J.K. Rowling has as much right to her opinion as anybody else, including me. It happens to be one I share with her. Okay? And I'm very alarmed at this. And so now J.K. Rowling and all that she's doing is coming under attack. And the co-founder of her charity, Tory peer Baroness Nicholson, is apparently being reported to the Lord's Commissioner for Standards over claims she bullied a British transgender model she called a weird creature. And again, that is her opinion. And she has a right to that opinion as much as anybody else. If you're transgender and you're upset by what I'm saying, that's okay. You have a right to believe as you believe. Just like I have a right to conclude as I conclude. I don't have a right to try and force or coerce you into my particular point of view. And you don't have that right relative to me or J.K. Rowling or the Baroness. That's just the way a free society works. What's that old saying? I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. We need to go back to that simple thinking. Everybody gets an equal say, and everybody listening gets to make up their own minds. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, talking about COVID-19 and the second wave. Welcome back to our show here, and we're hearing reports that the holdovers from Trump's 2016 campaign are not getting along very good with the new people added for 2020. And it's starting to show because Trump is kind of out there being Trump, which is all well and good. But he keeps making these horrible, horrible mistakes. And the most recent one had to do with his talking about the COVID-19 response and testing and saying that he told the government to slow down to lower the numbers. Now, the White House is claiming that this was a joke. But in watching the videotape, there was no tell. And anybody who works crowds, whether it's a teacher in front of a classroom or stand-up comedian or any of that understands you have to signal the crowd when you're being serious about something and when you're not. And that little signal is the tell. Could be a sly smile, could be a wink, could be something like that. Trump didn't have that. And he needs some coaching on how to work the crowd. He knows how to work the camera. He learned how to do that on The Apprentice, but working the crowd, he's still a little behind the 8 ball on that particular regard. So anyway, they're out there saying that the slowdown was just a joke. Of course, the liberal media is saying, oh no, he wasn't joking. He's really that stupid. At least Biden wouldn't have said that. Well, Biden wasn't in charge. Anyway, the New York Police Department has rearrested over 250 inmates after the COVID-related mass jail release. And, their concern is that it's spreading like wildfire, which is accurate. Apparently, the infections down in Florida are starting to escalate. Over in Great Britain, their coronavirus outbreak is shrinking. App data and ONS statistics estimate between 3,300 and 3,800 new infections per day in England as the virus continues its weekly fade. So that's a little bit of good news over there. Boris Johnson has announced that England's social distancing rule will be reduced from 2 meters to 1 meter from July 4th, allowing more businesses to reopen. Now, the White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, says Trump is not racist to call COVID Kung Flu and claims offensive term is to label its place of origin, Kung Flu. I think we heard about that a little while ago right here on this show. Nobody made a big stink about it then here. But then I'm not running for president this year. Maybe I should have. Bring back my motto from 2016. You could hardly do any worse. I'm looking at what's going on with Trump and Biden and say, I could actually do the job they're doing. Anyway, the FDA has issued a warning to Americans not to use 9 toxic hand sanitizers made by a Mexican company, because they are using methanol rather than ethanol. Now, ethanol is the alcohol that you can drink, called grain alcohol, but it's chemically different from methanol, which is called wood alcohol, and it's an industrial solvent. And if you drink that, it can cause all kinds of problems, including blindness. Now, if you watch the TV show Moonshiners, and you'll see they get their stills up and running, and you'll notice that the very first couple of jars coming out of that condenser, they'll just throw that on the ground because that's inevitably going to be methanol, and they know better than to drink that. So apparently this Mexican-based Esquio Biochem, SA-CV, apparently is using methanol as a disinfectant, which would be okay, but it can absorb through the skin and cause all kinds of blood problems. So just keep an eye out for that one here. All right, turning to the international news here, the U.S. is leading a coalition of one against China. Washington is falling dangerously short in its search for allies to defend Hong Kong and Taiwan. Nobody wants to get mixed up in another U.S. war. They're all going terribly. We've pretty much lost in Syria. Don't want to admit it. Which reminds me, right now, Steven Spielberg's movie The Post is rerunning on cable. And if you have not caught that film, you need to. It's about how the Washington Post handled the Pentagon Papers crisis. It's about Katharine Graham, who really became an icon for successful women by showing a great deal of courage in publishing these papers. More than that, it basically shows how the U.S. gets into these wars and can't get out. And I think possibly because going back to that exposure and looking at what's been happening all over the world with the U.S., with its sanctions and its war, I think other countries are just getting tired of this. They say, it's enough. It's enough. If you can't accomplish what you need to accomplish with what you've done already, then this is a lost cause. And again, that was the whole point of the Pentagon Papers. Washington, D.C. knew for years they could not win in South Vietnam. And they still sent all those young people to die rather than admit, hey, we blew this one. Which begs the question, how many people are we losing in Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq and all these other places in wars that ultimately are unwinnable? And what do the families feel about that? Okay, we're getting warnings from experts, or at least we're getting propaganda, that China is perfecting imp weapons, meaning electromagnetic pulse, and that they have been doing this primarily in response to the United States preparing for biological warfare. And the CDC, the National Institute of Health, and USAMRIID are supposed to have contingency plans to protect the American people from lethal biological weapons such as anthrax and genetically engineered smallpox, which could have mortality rates over 90%. So the coronavirus pandemic has exposed the fact that we have a dangerous weakness in U.S. planning and preparation to deal with the pandemic. Because we have one here that, to the best of anybody's knowledge, is naturally occurring. Because if it's engineered, it's a really lousy job. Anyway. Over in India, on the border with China, troops are given a fire-at-will orders against Chinese troops if threatened. Beijing is unhappy about that. And apparently India's troops have given complete freedom of action in hostile engagements with Chinese PLA forces. India, meanwhile, is seeking rapid purchase of 33 Russian fighter jets in response to the Chinese border fight. Boy, I have never seen so many countries so desperate to get wars going. And Claire was asking the other day, is there a possibility of a false flag on the 4th of July that would get us into something? Yeah, anything's possible at this point. It's scary. It's scary right now. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put that out when we open the phones, which is coming up soon here. The question I'm putting out to the listeners today, what is it you're really afraid of right now? Because these are fearful times. Are you afraid of, you know, the mobs coming and tearing down the statue of your grandfather? Are you afraid of the economy imploding and leaving you without any retirement? And let's sort of, you know, put our fears out there in the hope that a little illumination will erase them. All righty. According to John Bolton in his new book, Trump gave Netanyahu a green light for preemptive Israeli strike on Iran nuclear sites. And apparently Trump said, you tell Bibi that if he uses force, I will back him. I told him that, but you tell him again. Congress seeks to expand U.S.-Israel defense cooperation to include technology sharing. Well, there's nothing new in that. The U.S. has been sharing technology with Israel for years. Israel will turn around, re-engineer the technology, sell it off to other countries, some of whom don't really like us. So it's a raw deal for the American people because our money pays for the initial development of that technology. And it's being, you know, given to a country that doesn't really treat us very well at all. In fact, Israel treats the United States like a doormat. A lot of concern over Israel's unauthorized arms transfers. Okay, getting into the economic news. Trump has made an aggressive push to stop guest workers from taking American jobs. He has signed an executive order that is his most aggressive push to stop guest workers from taking American jobs. And they're talking about, 525,000. And Trump has cut 5 classes of work visas and Apparently somebody took him to the Supreme Court on this and they lost. So Trump won this at the Supreme Court. They reject the challenge to his policy. So Americans will start getting American jobs. And that's as it should be. You know, it's one thing when you've got a healthy economy and, you know, employers can't find qualified workers, you know, to let some qualified workers in. It's quite another when employers are simply looking for the cheapest possible employee from another country. All right. Asked about stimulus checks, Trump says the next package will be very generous. President Trump yesterday said the next stimulus package will be very generous and will be announced in a couple of weeks. Now, that's going to be a hard one for the Democrats to overcome in November. Getting into the world of computers and computer software. Apparently, somebody used an artificial intelligence algorithm to solve the mystery of California's enigmatic tiny earthquake swarms. And what they have discovered, you know, since 2016, there was 22,000 quakes, most too small to be felt by humans. And they were trying to figure out what was going on. Well, now this AI algorithm has determined that naturally circulating groundwater was the source of a succession of these tiny earthquakes that rumbled for 4 years underneath Cahuilla, which is a town in Southern California. And this is according to a new seismological study published in Science on the 19th of June. According to the authors of the report entitled 3D Fault Architecture Controls the Dynamism of Earthquake Swarms, they utilized advanced methods of earthquake monitoring, resorting to a computer algorithm to recognize the faint rumbles, rented lips, identify their probable source, and track how swarms such as this spread through complex fault networks. They're starting to figure that stuff out. Speaking of quakes, they had a big one down in Mexico, 7.4. That is a big, big quake here. And yeah, it's still trying to find out all that's happening down with there. Okay, there's founder and CTO of a tech company named David Heinemeier Hansen, and he's one of Silicon Valley's biggest critics. The co-founder of Basecamp and creator of the popular Ruby on Rails web application framework is far from your typical Silicon Valley executive. On social media, Hansen regularly tweets about breaking Google up and holding Tesla accountable for the failures of its autopilot, both of which I agree with, I might add. The company he founded is one of the few that has eschewed having a presence on Facebook. Actions like this have earned him over 400,000 followers on Twitter. Now, Hansen is once again taking aim at Silicon Valley's biggest firms. He claims that their near monopoly is stifling the internet, stating a handful of companies have colonized the web and they're choking it. And he's absolutely right about that. More than just pointing out these issues, Hansen has put his money where his mouth is and has actually tried to do something about it. Back in 2018, he and fellow Basecamp co-founder and CEO Jason Fried started what would become Hey. They paid $99 per year. Email service launched on June 15th is designed to protect users from the types of invasive surveillance that have become the norm. And again, it's very invasive. Claire and I just got 2 local phone numbers here. Less than an hour later, we were getting telemarketer calls. Project Veritas is out with a new video in which they've got a Facebook content moderator who basically is on tape saying, if someone's wearing a MAGA hat, I'm going to delete them for terrorism. Talk about a knee-jerk reaction and abuse of power and authority. I don't use Facebook anymore. So anyway, over at Apple, they're expecting to announce iOS 14, macOS Big Sur, and a huge Safari update at its first ever virtual Worldwide Developers Conference today, amid ongoing row with developers over Apple Store fees. And there's no question that Apple is a very expensive product, but you're paying for the quality, is what you're doing. And Claire and I are iPhone users. We just upgraded because the batteries were dying on the old one. And we've had Android. which we did not like. It's nowhere near as intuitive. Android is let's get as close to Apple as we can without violating their patents. And I think overall, to be very honest, I think these appliances are a little too complex for ordinary, everyday people. And I understand the people who work at Apple and work at all these companies, this is what they do. And that's all well and good because they eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff and they grow up with it, and it's what they do. But I think sometimes, looking at some of the stuff that's on this phone, and I'm not a slouch when it comes to technology, but I sometimes feel like, couldn't this be easier? Does it really need to be this complicated? And my answer would be no. Not that I'm ready to get a jitterbug or anything like that, but sometimes I wish they'd sort of be a little more real world. Anyway, Apple's making a historic change to the Mac by they're ditching the Intel chips for its own in-house ARM that increases performance and consumes less power. Power is definitely becoming a big issue across all of these devices here. Now, this is an interesting story. We all remember President John F. Kennedy's service in World War II, PT-109. It's what catapulted him into the public mind. And after PT-109 was destroyed by Japan, he took command of another boat called the PT-59. And it turned out this PT-59 was brought back to Manhattan, and it was sold into private hands to somebody who used it as a houseboat for a while, didn't even know the connection to John F. Kennedy. And then it simply deteriorated and it was allowed to sink. Well, it's been rediscovered, and they found it. They're going to raise it. They're going to take it to a museum for restoration and display. So that'll be kind of interesting to see. And again, it's part of our history. We should preserve it. All righty, let's see. We're coming up here on another commercial break. We're going to open the phone lines and start taking phone calls after we come back from these words from our sponsors. We got a couple more stories here from the world of space exploration and all kinds of good things like that. So we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go to Arjun in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I wanted to talk about China and India clash,
Yes.
like that happened on June 15th. So
Yes.
I wanted to tell you like what actually happened here was Chinese have actually advanced. There is a 4,000 kilometers of border India shares with China, and they have advanced the borders on various sectors. The place where this thing happened is called Galwan Valley. It is 12,000 feet above sea level, and it is like minus 20 is the temperature there normally.
Yes.
So what happened, like, so there are 3 patrolling points. So the 1992 pact is that both of these armies, they will not carry any weapons while they are patrolling because things can escalate very quickly. So they have to be without weapons when they go and patrol these points. So the clash happened at 3 points. They are called patrolling point 14, 15, and 17A. So what happened, like on 14, the Chinese came forward, and on 14, they built a structure and they started living there. And the discussions were happening from past 2 months. And on June 5th, Chinese agreed on the level of general levels meeting and all those different kinds of level meeting, high level meetings. They agreed they will retrieve back. On 15th of June, 10 Indian soldiers, they were patrolling this PP-14. So they went there and they saw the structure. They came back, they told the colonel. So the colonel went with 50 soldiers there, and they told them to retrieve back. And they said like no, and they were like new Chinese soldiers there. They have never seen those soldiers there. So the thing that like, and they had no intentions to retrieve back. They started throwing stones because they are sitting on the height. They started throwing stones, and they already had those they have sticks with barbed wire, and they already had that in place. And they started beating like these Indian soldiers, and they threw a stone at the colonel. Actually, it hit the colonel, and he died there. And
Yeah.
when this happened, then they called for all the reinforcement, and the clashes started happening. And the thing is that like 20 of the Indian soldiers died, and these Indian guys, they went in 5 kilometers inside their boundary, and they killed 42 Chinese soldiers. They, with their hands, they broke their backbone, 19, and they twisted their this necks. And 19 of these Chinese soldiers, they were found on our side, on the Indian side, with the twisted neck. And the thing is like their colonel was captured, and their 20 soldiers were captured. They exchanged it after this went on for 8 hours. They exchanged the prisoners after the things were done, and whatnot. So this is actually what happened. And the thing is that like what Chinese actually do is like they will actually advance. They will put a structure and they will say that this is my land. And so I mean, like this clash is actually this whole clash was just like this. So I just wanted to share this.
Well, thank you for the information, and it gives us a lot of details that we have not been hearing before. The concern, of course, is that this situation could escalate. Anyway, listen, Arjun, I have to let you go. We have to take a station identification. We have more callers waiting on the line, and we'll be back with hour 2 after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right back to the phones to Steve in New York City. Hello, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, there's actually a famous scientist, Marvin Minsky. He
Yes.
says he's a famous scientist who did the Epstein scandal. And,
Yes.
And he's part of Epstein scandal. He said that nuclear bombs are a hoax. He says that they basically detonate like huge stacks of dynamite in Hiroshima and something like that, and they fake the atom bombs are fake.
Okay.
And he's a famous MIT scientist, and he says atom bombs are a hoax. What's your opinion as a man of science?
My opinion as a man of science who's had some exposure to the issue is that nuclear weapons are very, very real. Now, when they did Project Trinity, they did, in fact, set off a huge stack of TNT to get a comparison in terms of the ground impact. But in my little debris collection, I actually have a piece of the desert sand from underneath the Trinity bomb, and it's been melted into green glass, which is something you don't get just with TNT. So, yeah, I think the weapons are very real. And just because somebody's from MIT doesn't mean they're free from being a goof.
And what do you think about the Japanese supercomputer that uses Fujitsu chips? What?
I said, which one? I mean, Japan has quite a few of them.
The new one on the top 500 list.
Yes.
Fujitsu chips.
Okay.
Number one, it's a New York Times article about being the fastest supercomputer in the world, the top 500 convention in Frankfurt, Germany. So apparently Intel's falling behind because many of the top supercomputers don't even use Intel chips anymore.
Yes. Well, you know, these days supercomputers are put together by simply racking together as many CPUs as you can. So past a certain point, it all comes down to the spreadsheet and cost effectiveness in terms of how much you're going to spend and versus how much computer power you're going to get. The problem with that particular architecture for a supercomputer is it constrains you to a certain class of problem that it will be effective on. Most of these supercomputers are really great Mandelbrot generators, but as they're finding as they get into the real world, they're not as effective. In fact, that was kind of the big downfall with quantum computing. When they started going out into the real world, they found out they were really not much faster than their conventional counterparts.
And what do you think about ARM architecture? You think ARM architecture is the future, or you think the traditional chips will stay alive?
I think ARM is just another step in the long progression of going from the original von Neumann architecture, you know, up through RISC versus CISC, and now it's ARM, and 5 years from now it'll be something else.
And there's rumors I heard from people in the government. They say the government had fiber optic computers. How those computers work properly?
Well,
they're like optical computers instead of photons instead of electrons.
Yes. Yes, that's been a stated objective for quite a few years, and there's an interesting story there. IBM actually hired a scientist to design a very simple optical computer demonstrator, and IBM's agenda was to justify continued investment and reliance on silicon-based electric technology. And this scientist that they hired kind of surprised them when he actually came up with a very simple optical computer that could take two numbers stored in fiber optics, add them together, and store the result in a third loop of fiber optics. So it's definitely possible, and I'm sure people are working on it. And if they can get it to work properly, it's going to be tremendously advantageous over the silicon technology. It's going to be much faster, much cooler, much more power efficient.
And what do you think about Apple Computer's conspiracy theory that Apple Computer and Microsoft created by the Illuminati or Freemasons? Because the first price of the first Apple computer was $666, and Bill Gates' birthday is October 28th, the same day of Jonas Salk, the guy who invented the polio vaccine. So some people believe that Bill Gates is part of some big conspiracy with his COVID-19, because his birthday is the same day as Jonas Salk.
Well, you know, there are real coincidences in a world that's as complex as ours here. And as far as Apple, it was steeped in a little bit of lore coming from Steve Jobs. I mean, originally it was supposed to be the Newton. And then they said, well, you know, Sir Isaac Newton didn't come up with the theory of gravity. It was handed to him by the Apple. So we're going to call this machine the Apple. Anyway, listen, Steve, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go because the phone lines are really loading up here. 800-313-9443. And let's switch over to Chris in Delaware. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing, man?
Doing fine.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I want to talk about Google algorithms. Did you see where you could try it maybe on the break, and then you could, you know, give us some more information if you didn't know about it? If you type in any number on Google, like any three-digit number, it'll be like, you know, just some random 364, and then type in new cases behind it. It'll automatically bring up like something about COVID. Like no matter what number that you type in, it'll be like, it'll add. It's like, oh, there were new cases there. Did you see that?
No, I didn't actually, to be very honest.
It's interesting. Try it. It's any random number that you could think in your head, like a three-digit number or even more, and then type it in there, and then new cases, and it'll bring up like an article from anywhere, and it's new cases. So it's, I don't know what you want to make of that. I don't know. That just seems, I don't know. It's interesting, right?
New cases. Yeah, I have it right here. 289 new COVID cases in Kentucky. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and enter another number. Enter like 346 or something.
No, I've validated it. You're absolutely right. It's doing that.
That's pretty strange, right? Maybe you look into that. I don't know. And then I don't know. That's why I called in about Google algorithms, because there's something funny going on. And then maybe I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. Do you remember back in Afghanistan, that CIA plane that crashed that had like 9/11 on the side of it? You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
I wonder whatever happened with that. I guess it goes down the memory hole, right?
Yep. Okay.
I don't know. That was just something I thought of. But and then I just had like two more things I just wanted to talk to you about.
Real quick.
You think? Yeah, I know. Putin's in on the New World Order, right?
No, I don't think he is at 100%.
all. You don't think so?
No.
Think he's fighting?
He does not want to surrender his sovereignty. He does not want to surrender his sovereignty.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that's fine. And then there's just one last thing. That you said that you had Trinity glass from the nuclear glass?
Yes.
You're not allowed to take that from the property. You know that, right? It's against the law.
You were, back when I removed it, it was legal to take that. In fact, they were selling it through Edmund Scientific Corporation. You know, I mean, I've had this sample for a long, long, long time.
Oh, okay. That's cool. All right. Well, like I said, yeah, look into that, Mike. Maybe you can, after the break, check it some more and, you know, about your opinion with maybe how Putin's not in on the New World Order, you know, with Chabad Lubavitch and stuff. And, you know, that anytime you Google a number, it just shows up Corona cases. Yeah. So.
That's a little weird.
Mike, you know, have a good. Hey, do you think Dustin's still wearing his mask in his house?
I have no idea. I'm sure he's going to call in
He's
before
sitting
the
there
end of the
right
day.
now. I know he'll probably call, and he's probably sitting there right now with his mask and his gloves on, right? It's all right. All right, Mike. Hey, have a good show, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's go to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there. First off, I think Dustin needs to see a shrink. I was absolutely stunned by your first caller's comments about nuclear bombs.
Yes.
My background in geochemistry got me in deeply into nuclear chemistry as well, and he needs to understand that when those bombs are detonated, they unleash a torrent of fission products.
Yes.
Strontium-90, iodine-131.
Stuff that does not come out of TNT.
No, they don't come out of a natural decay process. They're only derived from the fissioning of either the uranium the nucleus or the plutonium nucleus. And of course, you're going to derive plutonium, from the nuclear bombardment of uranium in a reactor. But you only get that from the fissioning of that nucleus.
Yes.
And those things are highly radioactive. Now, I've been to the Trinity site, and I've seen the Trinitite. I've had my own Geiger counter out there, and I check it. The fused green sand. And that's still radioactive, and that's radioactive because it picked up a lot of those those radionuclides with half-lives ranging from 30 years up to 100 years or more. So they're still intensely radioactive. But I mean, anybody who thinks that those bombs are nothing more than TNT is crazy. Look at the films of the bombs on YouTube. Go to YouTube. You could find a record of just about every surface detonation ever set off. Tell me that looks like that looks like a TNT. That's absolutely crazy. Yes. Now, a month before Trinity, the military did set off a 15-ton an explosion of 15 tons of TNT, very close to the ground zero of the Trinity detonation, and that was a big explosion, but it was nothing compared with what was derived from the partial the partial fissioning of that nucleus, that plutonium nucleus, in the big boy mock-up there at prototype there at Trinity.
Yes.
That's have you been there? Have you been to the Trinity site?
Yes, I have. Many years ago.
Hey, recall the crater there?
Yes.
That was formed by the downward pressure from the detonation. It wasn't caused by the excavation of soil.
Yes.
It's caused by the downward pressure. Now, that didn't happen with that TNT explosion.
No, it didn't. I've seen some aerial photos of the two craters side by side after Trinity, and it's very obvious they're different.
Oh yeah. One was a monster. The other one, by comparison, was a popcorn fart. to put it mildly. Anyway,
That's a colorful phrase.
Surprised.
I like that one.
Well, I think it's an apt comparison when you're talking about stacking up 15 tons of real TNT against a crude nuclear weapon.
Yes.
In other words, not a hydrogen weapon, but the first generation atomic weapons.
Yes.
So I'm just stunned, and he's either fallen for a ruse somewhere or he's been trolled. But there's no way in the world any reputable scientist from MIT has said that. Period.
Well, I've heard the name Marvin Minsky before, and it's if he's really out there saying these things. I mean, we've got people out there who still insist the Apollo moon landing happen, and maybe it's just a pathetic bid for attention, to get their name and their voice on the radio or something like that. But we just sort of ignore them and let them go their own way.
Yeah, I know that, but except that those moon landing sites have been spotted with telescopes. We know they're there. We're not the only ones that have seen them. Other countries with observation with observatories that have spotted them as well. And then, of course, you've had satellites that pick those things up as well.
Well, you know, if you're an
I don't,
amateur astronomer and you've got some decent equipment, you can still bounce lasers off those laser ranging retroreflectors that were left at all the ALCEP sites.
yeah. Actually, those reflectors that were set up there on the moon
Yep.
were used as part of an experiment down here on Earth that were set up here by the University of Texas to measure rates of C4 spreading.
Yeah.
Because it allowed them to calculate with great accuracy the rate at which tectonic plates move. So we know they're there. They're bouncing them off there, and then they're bouncing them off of something that was taken up there and put there by human beings, American astronauts. It's very real. And you know, anytime I hear somebody tell me that, well, they faked the moon landing, I go, okay, well, explain this then. How do we get those reflectors on the moon, idiot?
Yeah. No,
okay, well, that's all I got to say. Yeah, I'm just stunned that somebody would say that, and I anybody who really knows anything at all about nuclear weapons. In my life, my career, I've dealt with radioactive waste, high level and low level, for many years.
Yes.
And
Glad you're still here.
I have kind of, I have too, and I haven't died from exposure yet. But you know, anybody who's worked in that area will actually laugh. Would actually laugh at that.
Yes.
Anyway, good to talk to you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Mythbusters actually did a show on the Apollo landings in which they recreated the experiment of bouncing the laser off the LRRR units. So they're there. And if you're a serious amateur astronomer and you want to invest in a little additional equipment, you too can touch the Apollo sites and get some information back. All right, we're going to go to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, good day. Yeah, your last two callers were very good and very entertaining. Very good. Yeah, Michael, what I want to talk about, before I get to the Japanese computer, they're going to start it tomorrow, the most powerful computer, I guess, ever built.
Yep.
The Japanese got it now. I want to talk about what I heard again on the radio today here in Florida, is now that there's a woman's group that's demanding that Martin Luther King statue in Washington is going to be coming down because of his rape convictions. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I've heard about that one as well, and I think this whole thing has just gotten silly. Do you remember Monty Python, when they get into a situation that they couldn't resolve, and then somebody would come out and say, "Stop it, this is simply too silly."
Yeah, I'll never forget.
That's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, Monty Python's Flying Circus. That's what it is, a circus. Yeah, Michael, but getting back to now, if this happens, I wonder what the BLM and Antifa is going to do when Swartz, Gulag, that's his Soros' last name. His first name is Swartz. I'm sure you know that. He's according to what's going on with Soros, he's got dual citizenship in the United States and Hungary. But I heard he's not allowed in Hungary. So where is this guy Soros actually living at? Switzerland?
No, he lives in the United States. He lives in the United States, got a huge estate over in New York.
Why isn't this guy being arrested for all the vandalism and destruction of federal property and state properties in this country? Why? This guy's bringing tons of bricks in these cities, smashing windows out. I mean, this is all a set-up plan. Why isn't Trump arrested this guy Soros? According to what I saw on the website, he's worth $8.7 billion. His real name is Swartz. He's a Hungarian Jew. And this guy's not being arrested for the treason that he has committed against this country.
Yes.
Now, and we're not even talking about Bill Gates with the crap he did in India. But I want to know, you got these women now talking about, Bill Cosby, he went to prison for raping women, okay?
Yes.
And he did a lot for the black community. Let me tell you, Bill Cosby did a lot of good things for the black community as far as fatherhood and all that. So you really can't ever say nothing bad about Bill Cosby on that aspect or that regard. But what now they're talking about, I would like to know what BLM will do when Martin Luther King statue's got to come down and his monument's all destroyed. What happened, Mike? Can you tell us?
Well, I imagine the BLM and the feminists will have a fist fight in the streets.
That's what I'm talking about. You're going to have the feminists and BLM and Antifa going at it. It's going to be unbelievable. That will be an unbelievable scene if that really happens.
Well, I'm willing to donate a chainsaw to the event.
Yeah, well, I got some. Okay, you got you. That last caller hit with the bomb, but I'll go there. But listen, the whole thing is chaos. This whole thing has turned out to be chaos. But Trump is getting tough today, finally saying, you don't. Matter of fact, a lot of senators today, a lot of them said no destroying federal property. Confederate, Northern, Ulysses S. Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, you're not going to destroy these properties, man. And you know, Mike, I want to ask you, the people that I see that are light-skinned in these protests, I know they're atheists. I really firmly believe they're anti-constitutionalists. They're atheists. But what nationality do you actually think these people are? Are they Christians? Are they Jewish? What are they?
Well, they're obviously not Christian or Jewish if they're atheists.
Right, but I suppose their family at one time, you know, in their history, had to be something, or were they always atheists for the last 150 years? Because their family had to come from somewhere in Europe or somewhere. So
well, that would make them either predominantly Christian, possibly Jewish. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go. All right, I'll hang over the commercial. Don't hang up. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and a reminder that Republic Broadcasting is in the middle of a perpetual fundraiser. As we saw last Friday and through the weekend, this equipment is getting old, and it does wear out. You know, we're running it, 10, 20 hours a day, both in the studio and also here in our homes. And it does wear out. It really, really does. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. All right, we're talking with Tom in Florida. And Tom, you said you had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, Michael. First off, there's 103 shootings on Father's Day in Chicago.
Yes.
I believe it was 18 dead. That blew my mind. But the last thing, I'll leave it on that. The Japanese got this new computer now. I guess it's the greatest computer ever built, and I guess they're putting it online tomorrow. And what do you think that will do as far as what is actually this computer going to do for the world?
It's probably going to be working on exotic problems like, mass of the neutron. And a lot of these supercomputers are justified with claims that they can result in more accurate weather forecasts. A lot of them wind up doing work on nuclear warhead simulations. Some of them wind up doing massive image processing. When we lived in Hawaii, used to go down to Maui all the time to the Maui High-Tech Computer Center, which was one of the world's largest computers, and they were basically image processing data that was coming in from the telescopes at Haleakala. So it's a very specialized computer system for very specialized problems. Nobody's going to put it online and use it as a web server.
Michael, whatever happened to the Hydro Collider they did in France? Remember, they were smashing the atom, and they said if something could happen, a tragedy could happen, and make a big black hole or something. Whatever happened with that?
Well, it's undergoing a renovation right now.
Okay. I remember they were saying if they smashed the atom and some disaster could happen, and
well, they're out there claiming that by accident they could create a quantum black hole, which was sort of the basis for Angels and Demons, the Tom Hanks movie, Dan Brown novel, Tom Hanks movie. Whether or not they could actually do that, it seems remote given the energies required to create a quantum black hole. But, like with anything that's new and scientific, you've got people out there screaming, oh, it could be a disaster, it could be this, could be that.
Right. Well, okay, Michael, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to James in Tokyo. James, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I want to talk about the economy, but
yes.
First, I just want to say two quick things. First, I used to really look up to you as one of the most outstanding patriots in America, and I don't think that way anymore because once you moved from Hawaii to Indiana, you quickly changed shirts and you're wearing an Indiana shirt instead of a Honolulu shirt. And that's very disappointing for me.
I wore out the Honolulu shirt.
Yeah, okay. That's understandable. I forgive you on that one. I consider you the number one patriot again, Michael.
All right, thank you.
Your caller, Telly Savalas from Texas, he was a great caller. I hope he calls in again and gives his ideas about how radiation affects, from Fukushima, the effects of that, especially in the Tokyo area, since that's where I live. However, I disagree with him when he said, I believe he said that Dustin needs a shrink, and I totally disagree with that, because shrinks prescribe medicines, and we don't want Dustin on any meds. Maybe a psychologist who doesn't prescribe meds is probably a better alternative. Anyway, I want to talk about the economy a little bit.
Okay.
It's very hard for me to get a feel for it because I'm in Tokyo and I don't live in America anymore since 1990. They got this guy on YouTube. He's interesting, but he walks around with a like a cell phone camera on I don't know the word for, like a stabilizer stand, and just walks around New York City, where I used to live in the mid to late 80s, and all the shops are closed. This is stage 2 in New York City, where they're supposed to open up shops, open up hair salons, but only 50% capacity. So he's walking around, and all the places are boarded up because they broke all the windows, and they have graffiti on the wood that they covered the windows with. And he's walking. So the day of opening, he's walking around, and you hardly see any people except for bums who are like defecating on the street, and people like painting graffiti on the wood, and signs on different stores saying, yeah, today's the opening, but we're closing. And we're closing.
Okay.
We're closing.
James, I got to put you on hold.
Some stores are like, yeah. Okay.
I got to put you on hold. We got to take a commercial break. Don't hang up. We'll come right back to you. Go back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, I did a little checking over the commercial break here, and there was never a rape conviction against Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There was an allegation, but it never even went to court, as near as I can tell on this. All right, we're talking with James in Tokyo about the economy, and James, you had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, well, after what I said about New York, of how many of the businesses can only operate at 50% capacity during the second stage of their opening, and many are closing. I just can't ever see that city coming back. And then on the other hand, when you look at that's a very diversified, multicultural city. On the other hand, I got a stepmother living down in Palm Beach, Florida, which is a very rich area. Mm-hmm. Even in her place, I was on the phone with her last week, and she said, life here is so terrible because, many of this, the rent is very high in Palm Beach. Even in my building, I could go to the pool finally, but I got to wear a mask, but I can't go in the water, and all the restaurants are closed. And if I go over the bridge in Rivero Beach, which is the hood, I'm scared I'm going to get a brick thrown through my Jaguar. And, I just can't even see any way how you can come back from having maybe at least half of the small businesses just closing down. Now, I understand that, there'll be new entrepreneurs eventually who will come back and maybe take over this stuff at cheaper rent. But with all this money lost from mortgages, especially in New York City, where the rents are astronomical. My mom used to have a restaurant in New York City. They had 68 seats in the late 80s, and the rent was $22,000 a month.
Wow,
ridiculous. And you could only make it. If she did she had to do all these full lunches, and then if dinners were good, over a month they make money. If dinners were bad, they wouldn't make money. And so I just can't see how this economy comes back, because even if let's say you eliminate all corporate taxes and small business taxes, there's still so many people out of work, and so many people that can't pay their mortgage, and so many financial hardships. And I just don't even know how America can even come back. And how do you think America can come back.
Well, I think Trump did the right thing today, shutting down the immigration categories so that we have more American jobs for the American people. Because putting them back to work, that's really the only way to guarantee a successful recovery. Just handing out more free money and handing out more stimulus checks and everything, it'll feel good for the moment, but it's turning that monkey on our back into a gorilla.
Yeah, well, that was one good thing, but that's only like 500,000 people, and America has a lot more people than that, and
Yes.
they're probably like 50 million immigrants. So, even that might be insignificant. You're just talking maybe minimum wage jobs, because all the people from high tech companies like Germany, they got to be highly vetted, where they just let the people in from South America in without any vetting. Oh my God, I'm sounding like Tom from Florida, Mike. Excuse me. Anyway, I agree with Tom quite a bit. Anyway, Mike, hey, I see a bandage on your arm. I hope you're okay. I hope you're physically fine.
Yeah, I had to go to the doctor this morning.
Claire, and I hope Indiana. Yeah, I hope you're doing all right, my bro. And
Yep.
I hope you and Claire are doing good. And good talking to you, and I'll try and call in more. I've just been busy with stuff. And you take care, and I enjoy watching you live. And I'll get you a new Hawaii shirt or a Putin on a horse shirt, eventually, okay? I love you.
I have a Putin on the horse shirt somewhere. So much stuff got
I
lost.
know you do. All right. All right. You take care, Mike. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to switch over to Paul in New Jersey. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Michael, for one, let's remember, in the scale of billionaires, George Soros ain't all that. He's only worth $8.3 billion.
Oh, poor baby.
Now, Jeff Bezos
Start a
is worth
GoFundMe for him.
$161.4 billion. So clearly, Jeff Bezos, if he wanted to, he could neutralize George Soros just through his spending, if Jeff Bezos wanted, or any of the 58 other wealthier billionaires, wealthier than George Soros.
Yes.
So the fact of the matter is, George Soros is approved by all the other wealthy billionaires. We have to realize this. Once you accept that step in logic, which I think is obvious, then therefore you could say George Soros is actually a representative of the billionaire agenda. And since every one of these billionaires made their billions, how? I'll tell you how. Through the capitalist system.
Yes.
So therefore, all the billionaires like George Soros' agenda, and by the way, we've seen that over the past 2 weeks. You know why, or 3 weeks? Why? Of all the donations going to Black Lives Matter,
yes,
from wealthy people, the money's coming in left and right. And I just love hearing the guys who are capitalists, always critical of the socialists and the commies. And yet here it is, the wealthy capitalists are not only behind Black Lives Matter from their donations and the legitimizing of Black Lives Matter on the media and in the networks through their advertisements. The wealthy in these corporations, they're co-opting Black Lives Matter.
yes,
They're making shirts. They'll probably give special Black Lives Matter discounts, right? For
yes,
Black Lives Matter's members soon. Maybe you'll get a Black Lives Matter card. You can be a card-carrying member.
mm-hmm.
And then if you put the little sticker out front of your storefront, maybe your store doesn't get its window smashed. Who knows?
Ah, the old protection racket.
And so you got to wonder, and as I've said, there's obviously the billionaires are not hostile to any of this. They're not hostile to Antifa either. seem to in being enjoying this. And, one of the basic observations is that it's not ruining any of the Home Depots or the Walmarts. Although occasionally they do get looted and pillaged a little bit. But it's worth a few losses for the long-term project of destroying all the mom and pop shops and the smaller stores. Now, I tell you, one thing I think that's going to come out of this, Michael, and I was thinking this today, is I think a lot of McDonald's, a lot of these burger joints, I think they're going to go all drive-through.
Yes.
Because I think what they're finding out is, wait a minute, we're still operating the business successfully, right? And you know what? When you don't have people coming in to your store, that means you don't have to mop up the store. Nobody's using the bathroom. You don't have to clean up the debris. They're not taking excessive amounts of soda from the soda dispensers. They're not unruly. And like I said, they're not trashing the bathrooms. So I have a feeling out of all this, one of the things you're going to see is you're going to see double lanes at McDonald's. They're going to have both sides.
They already have them. They already have them.
And also more robotic, too. They'll be able to hide the robots in there and just cash and pay through a ATM or, like a machine, kiosk.
Yes.
And then it just comes down the chute and on you go. Right? But either way, they're moving from, through this BLM, through the riots, they're going to move to the next phase of capitalism as depicted by Andrew Yang, right? Jeremy Rifkin. And I think the elite in all of these people donating to BLM and Antifa, they kind of are approving of this. This is just bringing them into the next phase of capitalism. And hence, the stock market seems to be doing okay for a lot of these corporations.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just think the funny thing of it all, and by the way, they don't really care about the statues getting torn down either. They don't care about that. They don't make any money from that. So what do they care? So this is perfect for their new world order. They're loving it.
All right. Well,
yeah,
you raised some very, very good points here. And I'm going to let you go because we're getting close to the top of the hour here and we still have callers waiting on the line. So let's switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, everybody was wondering where you are and if you're wearing your gloves and your mask today.
The mentally ill guy from New Jersey, Dustin. Mike, eat recycled food. It's good for the environment and okay for you. Remember that?
I remember that from Judge Dredd.
Yeah. You look back. Remember when you got like a hamburger in McDonald's? My God, man. Remember? Did you ever look? Remember the pictures? They always showed you such like a huge burger. And when you got it, you open it, you're like, "Where the hell is it? Where's the beef?" Where's the beef? That woman from Wendy's was like, that was probably like the best commercial.
Oh, they study that one in advertising school.
Mike, you know who my psychiatrist is on the weekends?
Who? Because
some of your listeners think I'm mentally ill. It's the 7 Samurai on Blu-ray at a bottle of sake.
Well, Dustin, look, if it'll make you feel any better, I don't think they could lock you up. On the other hand, if you were already inside, you'd have a devil of a time getting out.
Did you ever see? I don't know if you guys ever see 7? It was a great. It was a ripoff off like the Magnificent Seven, but it was a great movie.
It went the other way. Kurosawa did the 7 Samurai, and then it was stolen for the storyline for the Magnificent Seven. And if you look at the more recently released prints of it, it says right at the beginning, derived from Akira Kurosawa's 7 Samurai.
Okay, getting on to James from Tokyo was great to hear. Like I wish he would have told us like how's it going in Tokyo. If he can call back tomorrow, like what's going on. New York's not as bad as some of the videos on YouTube are claiming. I mean, I know you watched Dr. John Campbell on YouTube. He showed videos of coming out of Pakistan where there's gurneys with people outside in agony. And I saw a video of some, like, people in India having hard times breathing, you know, I mean, but New York, he showed a video of people, like, at night, nobody's wearing masks. Everybody's, like, going to their nightlife, partying,
Yes.
you know, like what's going on in Florida. Because you know what's going on in Florida, Texas, and Arizona, the cases are going up.
Yes.
And Mike, and you know, I don't wear my mask driving. I see people driving wearing a mask, unless you're with, like, in a car full of people, or, you know, don't wear your mask driving, okay?
No.
Unless you're by yourself, you know. But I see people driving with masks on by themselves. No, don't do that. I also see people not wearing their mask in the store where it's under your nose. I know you said Claire does that sometimes.
Yes.
That's not helping either.
Nope.
You know, I mean, the reason the mask is there is just to protect you and other people. Like, I don't understand why still people have a hard time wearing the mask. Like, you go into the store, you come out of the store, you drop your mask. Like, people went to the rally. Nobody had their mask with Trump rally. People who work for Trump, some of them had their mask on. So it's just like a hit or miss thing. It's not good, Mike. You know,
No.
I always look at Asia. Asia is the beacon of the world, I have to say, sadly. But, you know, Indonesia, China, Japan, they're wearing their masks for a reason. I mean, Japan's not totalitarian, as some claim, you know, China is, but why are they wearing their masks? Because they're better safe than sorry. You know, we still don't know what this virus is, and the resurgence is going to be, you know, the second wave. You know, they say the second, was it COVID 2020, right? COVID 20, the second wave, right? But, you know, it's just, I just don't understand. People still have this attitude where I'm not going to wear a mask because it's either my rights or it's not good for you, or, well, we know where Mark from North Carolina stands. Mark might be right with certain masks not being good for you, but it still protects you to a certain extent. And wouldn't you rather be safer than sorry? Because you, Mike, I mean, you're a young guy. I'm 50. But I don't want to spread it to you or, say, your wife, because I don't feel comfortable wearing a mask. You know, it's just I think it's common courtesy, really. I mean,
Yes.
You're not wearing your mask for 12 hours a day. You know, if you go to Walmart, you're not really wearing it for that long unless you work there. You know, so I just think it's a selfish thing, just like those people in Florida did. Remember, Mike?
Yes.
They didn't wear their masks. They went to the spring break. They went to the restaurants, right?
Yep.
What's going on there now? They have an increase. Now,
yes.
You know, Mike, increasing doesn't mean you're getting sick and dying, but it's still spreading it. And that's what you want to keep lower. You know? I mean, what do you have to say? I mean, you're in Indiana, so you know, I mean, they still have a mask. Is that mandatory in Indiana?
Not where I am, no.
Are you wearing it, though, or do you feel safer wearing it, like, when you got a lot
I'll
of people
wear it out.
store,
I'll wear it out to the places that say, please wear the mask, you know, like the local supermarket and the haircut place and other places where they're not bothering. I don't bother. I sort of go with the flow
or if
on
you're
this.
outside.
Yes.
If you're outside. If you're in a store with a lot of people, wear the mask, man. I mean, you know, what's it called? Viral load? Steve Elkins needs to probably call in tonight or tomorrow. You know, I'm going to get off the phone now, Mike, but have a good night. Tell Claire.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We still got callers on the line. We're going to try and fit as many of them in as we can in the last segment of our program. We'll be back in just a few minutes. And welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. We're going to go right back to the phones here to Kevin in West Virginia. Hello, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. I wanted to call in and talk to you about masks, since everybody's calling in and talking about masks for a moment.
Yes.
I have whatever state you live in, like with you, Indiana, type in indiana.gov, and you will find under that website that you will find exemptions for not wearing a mask.
Yes.
See, this whole mask thing is just an act of submission. That's all it is. They want you to submit to wearing a mask because if you submit to wearing a mask, you'll submit to taking a vaccine when it comes out. When you submit to taking a vaccine, you'll submit to be tracked whenever they come out with their little tracker thingies. You know, all of this, I told you from day one when all of this started, it was a power grab. That's what this is. It's just an act of submission to get you comply, to get all of us to comply. The mask is just a psychological thing. It doesn't protect you. Not at all does it protect you. The CDCs came out and said, no, it really doesn't protect you. Neither does wearing gloves. And I've always said from day one that this was a hoax. The media hoaxed a pandemic. They got caught. What did they do? Then they brought up race riots and race war and hyped up the Greg Floyd case, which also, if you know this or not, is also the Greg Floyd thing. He was deemed to be a COVID death. I don't know if you know that or not, but it came out that they labeled his death as a COVID death. Interesting, right? See
Not
how
surprised.
fake all this is? It's all fake. It's all fake just to get us to comply. When you comply, you die.
Yeah, I mean, we already know those homemade masks are not going to be effective at all. The weave on the cloth is simply too great.
Well, yeah, and that's why I had looked up different states and found that there's exemptions. If you have a mental illness, I know people were joking around with Dustin. Hey, Dustin, you ain't got to wear your mask. It says mental illness, you ain't got to wear one. Or other health. I love you too, Dustin, by the way. And if you have other health issues, like if you're deaf, you don't have to wear a mask, you know, because you got to see people's reading the lips. Other people, you know, look at other people to see the lips, you know, if you lip read. So this whole thing, it's a joke. It's all a big joke. And who's to blame? Us for submitting to it. Us for complying to it. Whatever happened to 14 days to flatten the curve? Months later, things still ain't opening up. That's why I say this is nothing more. There was a power grab and an act of submission. That's all this is to get us to submit. That's all I have to say, Mr. Mike.
Yeah, we're going to have to let you go here. We're at the end of the program, and my apologies to the callers still waiting online. Please call back tomorrow. We'll get you in on the phone lines then. So that's it for this Tuesday here. And please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN. Call your local talk radio station. Ask them to carry the RBN programming. Please spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. Hardware is wearing out. We need to buy replacements for all this kind of stuff. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.